taking a look at today's list. Once again, if you're on the YouTubes, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to check out the live stream, you slackers. But obviously, we've been working on the Ragavan lists for the last couple weeks. The Sandy Dog list, it just didn't go well. Now, part of it was, obviously, I had some misplays, so that happens. But now we're working kind of a hybridization of the lists between Frank Karsten's list, the list that we've been working on, Sandy Dog's list to a point. But basically, we're trying to throw everything in a masher and see what happens. Still running a couple copies of Ragavan. I think that having more access to more 1-drops is a good thing. We've kind of gone through the debate. There really are no good 1-drops outside the two that we normally run. Nakadal has its issues with mana base. The Something Ronin and Goblin War, whatever, both have huge drawbacks. One you have to cast every turn. The other one you have to return a card to your hand or land to your hand every time it deals damage. It's just neither one of them are playable. We've tried both of them. Another suggestion other people have made: Grim Lavamancer. Different metas, Lavamancer is a good thing. Lavamancer, much like Searing Blood, is good in metas where there's tribal decks. Humans, merfolk, spirits, elves, etc. Guess what's not really part of a format right now? Any of those decks. Yes, it can be helpful in matchups like Yogg or Murktide to a degree. Not really that great against Hammer Time because of how their deck shapes up. But it is a card you can consider. I don't think it's worth it. I think Burn is kind of in this niche place where it needs to get the game over. It can no longer really play these like turn 6, turn 7, turn 8 games anymore. It really has to be a turn 4, turn 5 deck anymore. It can't play the long game anymore. The control decks, the counter spells are just too good. They have their own game plans, whether it be a bunch of counter spells, whether it be life gain in the form of Omnath. Burn just has to get the game over. Set match, that's kind of where Burn's at in the meta. To that end, we're kind of niching down to what we're doing. I'm still not sure on the 19 or 20 land debate. For right now, I'm running the 4 canopies, the 1 Sekenzin, just to avoid taking a little bit of damage on the Fiery Islet front. This does give you a little bit of utility with Sekenzin. We might actually try something tonight, boarding out Sekenzin on the draw sometimes, just to see how that feels. Maybe shaving down a land on the draw. That way we can have access to more spells. Just something in theory crafting that might work. Beyond that, the only other notable thing in the main deck, 3 copies of Eidolon. I really like it when we only ran 3 copies. The 4th copy sometimes is a little bit clunky. Drawing multiples can be really bad, especially when you're in a lot more racing situations than you used to be. There's a lot of decks that this card used to really prey on, just really aren't out there anymore. There's not any storms. There's not, Blue-Eye Control has so many different tools to deal with an Eidolon. Some of which include Leyline Binding just don't deal any damage to them. So its stock is kind of diminished. I still like having it a 3 of. Makes it a little bit easier on the sideboard switching too, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then I'm choosing to run 3 Lightning Helix, as really life gain hasn't been that prevalent a part of the format. And I do like an additional instant speed answer to things like Ragavan, which can be annoying with its dash mode. Okay, so while we're doing what we're doing in the main deck, sideboard. Last week we tried the Sandy Dog list with Searing Bloods. I know some people want me to try that card. Much like Lavamancer, I just don't think it's well positioned. Hasn't been for quite some time. Deflecting Palm, I like it as a 2 of. I only like to see 1 per game. There are sometimes you can get burnt, or sometimes you can do okay in the burn matchup with it. Sometimes it can hit a Murktide, sometimes it can hit a Death Shadow, sometimes it can hit a Titan, but it's not the best position that's been in the format. The matchup it's best in against is Hammer Time. They generally know how to play around it. We've seen a lot of good Hammer pilots, the few that we run into in the leagues. It just doesn't do us a lot of good. Path to Exile. I know people don't like this card in their burn deck. I regretted not having it a lot in this last league. Whether it be 4 Furies, whether it be Murktides. I mean, last league really didn't help because we played against 3 Murktide decks and a Rakdos Scam deck, all of which you went path against. Kind of why I stick to having at least a couple of paths in my sideboard. Don't think it's at its best right now. Don't think it's at its worst right now. Rolling Vortex. Life gain's a thing. You got to have some preparation for it. The free cost, obviously, we haven't run into a ton of Cascade decks lately, which has been a little bit weird. I figured that'd be a deck that would kind of rise with the banning of Yorion. But we haven't seen a ton of Rhinos. We haven't seen a ton of Living End lately. Still a card you want for those matchups. It's okay in some spots against things like Omnath, Life Gain, etc. Smash to Smithereens. Hammer Time's a deck. Sometimes we'll run into Chalice. Sometimes you'll play against Urza Saga Asmo decks. You just want a card for those style matchups. Smash is the best option. You can bring in Wear Tear, but Wear Tear is really only good against Leyline of Sanctity. If you're seeing a bunch of Leyline of Sanctity, probably shouldn't be playing Burn anyway, but it is a card you can bring in for those matchups. Sanctifier and deck. As far as the debate between this and Core Firewalker, Burn's not a big part of the meta right now. Play Sanctifier. It's better against Scam. It's better against Murktide. It's better against Dredge. It's better against Reanimator. I'm sure there are other decks. It could bring it in against Yawgmoth, but I don't think it's worth it. Exquisite Firecraft. There's a lot of blue decks out there. Murktide being the biggest one, being able to force through a spell that can kill them. Obviously, it's a Nombo with Sanctifier. I'm not going to deny that. But having an uncounterable 4 damage spell against them, nice to have. Sometimes you gotta kill 4 toughness Ledger Shredder. Sometimes you gotta kill them through a handful of Flusterstorms, counter spells, Archmage's Charms, all this other stuff. It's a nice card to have. The only other card we've really been playing lately is Containment Priest. And I swear I know what's going to happen. I've taken Containment Priest out of my deck. We're going to run into 3 creativity decks this league. Just because. But Containment was mainly there for creativity. It's kind of a poor man's Orvar. I know people were talking about Hallowed Moonlight. Hallowed Moonlight's kind of in the same vein that people are arguing about Path to Exile. I just don't think it's a good card for this. I think it's good for a deck like Blue-White Control that's trying to buy time. I don't really think Burn wants to buy time specifically against that matchup. I think we just want to get them dead. And Exquisite Firecraft also helps force through their Flusterstorms, Spell Pierces, etc. So I think it's a solid card right now. We'll try it out again, see if it comes up. That's it. Let's get into some matches. Happy holiday season, everybody, and hope your day is going well. Alright, we're back for match number 1 against Mario Gomes. I thought that was Mario Gnomes for a second. On the play. Immediately staring down a 4-lander. This is a tough one. I honestly don't know if this is a hand we could keep. So I'm going to try it because we have Ragavan into another 1-drop plus stuff, but this is probably a hand we should mulligan. I could really screw with my opponent and cast Ragavan off of Kenzen, but I really don't think that's going to mess with him terribly much. Alright, so we're going to get Prismatic Ending. Nope, Esper Sentinel. Okay, so immediately running into Hammer Time. Presume they're going to block here. This is actually, I think, the very first matchup we played when we added Ragavan to the deck, and it's not good in that matchup. I'm not going to pretend that it is. Ragavan is very much a card you want in matchups where your opponent doesn't have a bunch of random 1/1 bodies lying around, etc. opponent with the ultimate chump blocker, so our creatures are doing nothing this game. So the reason we kept the hand just isn't good enough. Okay, that's not terrible. Especially if they go to block with the reality chip. It's possible we should blaze this, but if they just want to bounce that, I'm good. Well, it's really tanking on their blocks. I've noticed the few Hammer Time players we've run into in leagues tend to really tank on like every decision. And I know the deck can be a bit complicated to play. I'm not denying that, but it's just like, maybe it's possible I don't take enough decision time in what I play. Alright, my opponent's going to 9. Okay, they're playing a Stoneforge Mystic. So I actually want to fetch at the end of turn. Okay, so they must have a Pure Steel Paladin. Alright, so we're punished. We're punished for a land draw, or for keeping a 4-lander. The plus side for us here... Actually, I don't think it's going to matter, because if they just fetch... Shadow Spear off of their Urza Saga, having 2 chump blockers literally doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and attack, force them to decide if they want to block or not. If nothing else, okay, whatever. They just give up Stoneforge Mystic and don't care. I'm going to say, if nothing else, we force them to expend some mental energy since they like to seem to think so much, but... Yep. The best line for them is go grab Shadow Spear, if in fact they have Pure Steel Paladin. Although actually they shouldn't have cast Hammer. Okay. 3 mana. Okay, so they have a Paladin and another Hammer. Yeah, they just had another Hammer. Alright, well that was a fun game of Magic. No reason to show them the Sekenzen. Sideboard, Path comes in this matchup. Smash comes in this matchup, as does Deflecting Palm. Boros Charm I generally like to board out in creature-based matchups. It's not the most ideal situation, but it's just nice to board out anything that doesn't interact with creatures. The other cards we can consider boarding out, Ragavan is a little bit subpar in this matchup, just simply because it's an X1. Eidolon can be okay on the play, on the draw it's kind of terrible. The rest of the cards in our deck, I think this is supposed to be a board Ragavan matchup out, but we really want to leave them in to continue to test them, because that's one card I'm not decided upon yet. I don't think it's Lava Spike. It's not Searing Blaze. Maybe it's Skewer? A couple copies of Skewer and like 1 Eidolon, just because I want to leave Ragavan in. Wait, what happened? Okay, I'll turn the game. Like, not sure what happened there. But yes, let's play first. His hand is aggressive, if nothing else. Problem with the Hammer Time matchup specifically is the fact that they just get to bring in things like Sanctifier, or some builds used to have not Core Firewalker. What's the one drop that protects from red? I'm seeing. I can always see the image of the card, and I know what the card text is, but I never remember the card. It's the one drop, protection from red, sack it to prevent damage from a red source. You think after you play against these cards enough, you'd remember them, but when you don't see them as often, they kind of go out the window. Alright. Lead on Goblin Guide. We're still Paladin on top. Good to know about. Opponent presumably going to fetch a basic here. Yep. So Pure Steel trades with nothing. They're drawing Shadow Spear, which is not good for the home team. What you got, friend? Wish we had like a tanking timer. Ding 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 ding, like, or playing like the Jeopardy theme music for every time our opponent tanks for like 5 minutes for a pointless decision. Like do 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 do. Tank hard, block nothing. Good times, good times. So my opponent did not play anything this turn besides Esper Sentinel. So their hand likely does not contain a Ornithopter, Memnite, that kind of stuff. Sigarda's Aid. Okay. Opponent's just going to play a Shadow Spear and pass. So interesting. So we have a couple of plays left to us here. And this is where Hammer Time gets tricky, and where I joke about them tanking, but we have to tank as well. So Deflecting Palm is actually like one of the more difficult cards to evaluate in the matchup, because a good Hammer Time player knows how to play around Deflecting Palm. So our options are play Swift Spear, bolt this, don't hold up Deflecting Palm, or bolt this, hold up Deflecting Palm, don't cast Swift Spear. So I don't want to try to play a game of chicken with my opponent having Blacksmith skill or Spell Pierce or any of that. So I'd probably want to bolt this Esper Sentinel during their turn, or during our turn. So I think for that reason I'm going to go bolt the Esper Sentinel, don't pay, deal them 6, put them to 8, and hold up Deflecting Palm. Now obviously that's not ideal, but if they go in for the one-shot kill, which they may feel obliged to, or alternatively I can hold up bolt if they cast Pure Steel Paladin, So many plays. Okay, Forge Tender makes it even more tricky. They might just... whatever. So in the end, we basically chose to do nothing but attack, because we're kind of forcing them to react. Alright. We're doing this to see if we can force some action with like a hammer or a blacksmith skill or something. I am not paying, no. Opponent just lets it go. Goes to 8, plays Forge Tender. Equips Shadow Spear. So if we attack, we need to consider lining up blocks here. I don't know why they're tanking while I'm casting this spell. I swear they must be double queuing. But so if we line up attacks, Goblin God, this, this, they can block 2, and obviously kill one of our creatures, probably Goblin God. If we Lightning Helix them pre-combat, that puts them to 5. They go up to 7, and then they'd go up to 7. Go to 1. So I just don't think it's worth it here. Okay. Yeah. If they have Spell Pierce, they get us. There's nothing I can do about it. If they attack. Which, kind of surprised, they... Most Hammer opponents know to play around this card. They must have Spell Pierce, right? Okay. Guess if we draw Path, we have a chance here. Alright, and we're dead. So. It's really... So we would have put them to 1. They still get to do the hammer thing. I don't know. We played to our outs, I think, the best that we could there, but it is what it is. Alright, back for match number 2. We're on the play. So I'd love to play first. This hand is a pretty good burn opener. 1-drop plus 1-drop plus bolt. Tends to be our better openers. Obviously leading on mountain to avoid taking any unnecessary damage. One of the downsides of having Sunmake Canyon is we're going to be taking a lot of damage from our land base. But obviously leading on Goblin Guide because it's more damage. Well, it shows us polluted delta. No idea what that means. Okay, so we're probably up against Scam. Mm-hmm. And our opponent has a monkey on top. Cool. And we know they have the second land, so they can just dash monkey. I'm honestly surprised they didn't dash there. Guess they're trying to hold up like another rebirth effect. Play out the land they know about. I'm not going to attack with Goblin Guide. I really don't want monkey hitting us. Okay, so they're the Grixis variant, which really, I think the only card that matters is like Spell Pierce and Drown in the Lock. Well, that doesn't look like they have Drown in the Lock. Okay, Seasoned Pyro. Pitching random nonsense in their hand, probably 2 lands. Thought Season Undying Mouse. Okay, so they were holding up an Undying effect. This is feeling very reminiscent of last week's stream. So we're taking, what, 8 here, and if they have Bolt, we're dead. Interesting. Not sure why you would hold back. Okay, apparently you don't have Bolt. I know that much. Too little too late, my friend. Even if we play this out, block here, we still take 6 and die. So we are, in fact, dead. Alright, definitely want the Sanctifiers. Definitely want the Paths. Not a huge fan of Palm in this matchup. They deal damage in decent chunks, but it's not like a huge burst like Murktide or something. Because they either have a 4/4 double striker or a 4/3. It's somewhat worth it, but I'd rather have cards that impact things. Taking a look at the Grixis builds. Yeah, all the ones that they say are Grixis are really just Orvar on the sideboards. That's not really what I'm looking for. Some of these versions are running like Leisure Shredder and Expressive Iterations. They're literally not even running counterspells, though obviously they have counterspells on the sideboard. So I don't know if I want to bring in Firecraft or not. Like maybe, because I go down the Boros Charms anyway. Eidolon, probably go down those. Just because most of their nonsense happens on turn 1 if they have the good draw, their nonsense happens on turn 1. So once again, perfectly solid opening selection of Magic cards, but we are playing against Scam, so expect half these cards to not be in our hand next turn. I mean, Scam is one of the top decks in the format for a reason. It does the Scam thing fairly consistently. You're either staring at a 4/4 double striker on turn 1, or you've been double thought seized and your opponent has a 4/3 menace creature. It's just... beyond that, the deck is very medium and very beatable. But... Alright, Spiral on top, sure. Oh, and don't forget Blood Moon, but Blood Moon's not as... Wait, what's going on here? Did you forget to play your Rebirth effect? Okay, yeah, that's a card. They pitched the Spyro. They had Fury pitching Fury. I'm not a huge fan of this play, but since they're so far down on resources and we don't even know if they have a second land, I'm just going to do that and kind of hope that we've kind of choked their game plan. They even had a Rebirth effect? Okay, I am completely confused as to why my opponent did what they did, but, you know, whatever. Unless they just literally drew this, but we knew they were drawing the Spyro, so... Feels like you really wanted to use... I know Oh, and I forgot to play my own Rift Bolt. Good job. So busy being confused by what my opponent's doing, I misplayed myself. Opponent pitches Expressive Iteration, Terminate. Alright, I mean... I guess we fetch Sacred Foundry here, that way if we find... Sanctifier, we can at least cast it. So my opponent, if they want to kill either one of our Swift Spears, has to trade their entire board for one creature. I think it's more likely just chump chump. Yeah. So that makes the most sense, because they're not particularly close to bringing this back if it dies. And obviously if their hand is like Fury red card, just makes sense to preserve their life total. Alright, not the most exciting draw. When are they? Am I getting Kolaghan's Commanded here? I am in fact getting Kolaghan's Commanded. Cool. Bless you. Here comes a grief. With one card left in hand. Let's take the pressure off the table, deal them damage. Now obviously we could be going face, trying to race them. They'd probably just trade creature for whatever anyway. Maybe it was just proper to go face with that, put them to 6. But these are literally the kind of matchups where I'm just like, okay, if they're not pressuring us, their deck doesn't do anything like particularly impressive in terms of like damage out of nowhere. So if they don't have like yeah, that's whatever. Opponent gets to flicker. Alright, well that's a interesting choice. They bolt my creature when they could have... That seems like a misplay. They could have bolted my face, let their Pyro die, and then draw 2 cards. Just seems like a terrible misplay on their part. Alright, feels like we're going to get Kolaghan's Commanded again. Or not. Okay. So we pass. No reason necessarily to path this Spyro. At least not yet. Opponent, at least to their credit, is recognizing the game needs to be over. And there's a good chance they have creature kill spells chilling in hand, so... At least if they go to K-Command us, they're not going to get anything out of it. And we don't necessarily want to path this Season Pyro, because they could have Fury in hand, and that would enable them to cast it. Now obviously, equation changes a little bit. Okay. Make sure we activate with the basic mountain, that way we can still play Sanctifier if we draw it. Swift Spear, probably not going to be good enough here. I'm suspecting they have Terminate or Fatal Push or Bolt or something in their hand. Yep. I'm going to say, they don't generally attack with Season Pyro against a deck with haste threats unless they have something to deal with it. Yep, put it with a Fury. This is why we save the path, because... And also why we didn't path the Season Pyromancer, because we really didn't want to give them another basic if they even run one. Okay, so they have no cards in hand. So I do not feel bad about doing this. Okay, they do have a second basic Swamp, which is not surprising for a Blood Moon deck. And they get to see our sideboard card because, well, once again, we're not sure if they have counter spells in their sideboard, but it is still a card we're bringing in. And that's the difference in the matchup. Like, if they have their busted nut opening draws, it's kind of hard to beat them. You know, it's hard to beat a 4/4 double striker on turn 1 if you don't have Path or Sanctifier. It's hard to beat double Thoughtseize 4/3 body behind. But the hands where they have the nut draws, they're usually very far ahead. The hands where they just keep a decent set of magic cards, generally not all that good. One of the things Burn always did historically against mid-range decks like Jund or Red-Black Shadow or just these kind of mid-range piles is if they weren't applying pressure to Burn, because they don't play a high amount of counter spells, like obviously their deck has blue to it, but it's mostly for expressive iteration, maybe some cheap counter spells. We're not really playing around counter magic, we're just trying to get them dead. So if their opening salvo doesn't deal with us and you're kind of left in this kind of like top deck situation, oftentimes Burn will win those top deck situations if you can manage their pressure. This hand is, well, it's good until we get scammed. They kept 7, so we're definitely getting scammed. Oh, they just have a turn 1 right man. Sure. I guess we can wait till combat. Even if they do an Undying effect on this, I don't really care because it's Ragman. If I get counterspelled, I'm really gonna hate myself. But in fact, we almost want them to waste like an Undying effect on that. Now they have literally nothing. Cool. Searing Blaze is a bit awkward. I'm going to play this Swift Spear. There's a very good chance it's just dying, but we do have to play it. Okay, I will take that. Bolt is obviously kind of middling here. I could have played it for some extra damage. They could have something weird like Unholy Heat in their deck. Not likely, but it does play around. Alright, so they're going to be expressively iterating themselves. I was kind of hoping they'd play another idiot of some kind. Even if it's like Fury or whatever. As long as it's not Grief. Okay, so Snow-Covered Swamp. Just gonna bolt them to use our mana. Alright, so that was actually a very good draw for us in terms of using our mana. It allows us to keep an uncracked fetch land for Searing Blazes, while also allowing us to use our mana. Alright, so we're getting good griefed. I think we just let our opponent take one. They'll probably take the Firecraft, hope to blank our other Searing Blaze. Okay, they actually took one of our Searing Blazes. Interesting. So we're going to fetch Basic Mountain, Searing Blaze this Grief. don't think we have quite lethal lined up, but we are going to put them in a relatively low life total here. Well, hello there. Yeah, I think we play that one instead. Seems like the card we like to have in this matchup. Obviously, this makes so Exquisite Firecraft isn't uncounterable, but I now have a card that literally says protection from your deck. So they get to grief away our Firecraft here, which I think I'd rather have the Sanctifier on board. And if we draw a removal spell for this grief, we can deal them a lot of damage. Is that lethal? So we can either put them to 2. Yeah, I think we just put them to 2, because we can either put them to 2 or put them to 1. Put them to 1 doesn't really shut anything off at this point. They really don't need to crack any more fetch lands. They might have some type of edict effect in their deck, like a sudden edict. I know I've seen Dingo play sometimes. Alright. And that, we probably would have gotten there anyway, but that is a tricky matchup sometimes. Alright, back for match number 3. Guess I'd like to play first. Alright, 3-lander. Hand seems pretty reasonable overall. Keep. I'm against that Gigantha. Don't think Gigantha really tells us a lot. Lean on Sacred Foundry, leaving the ability to Searing Blaze. So the decks that play Gigantha are usually Izzet or... Okay, never mind. Okay, basic forest into... I have no idea. Okay, so Ponza maybe? Alright, so our lands might be getting blown up this game. Just a thought. Our lands might be getting blown up, or we might be Blood Moons and not have a castable card in our hand. So, Renin ticks. Okay. Into a land. Play a land, have a bolt. Even if they have a bolt, they have to bolt themselves to bolt. Looks like they just have another Utopia Sprawl. Arbor Elf. You're a Karn deck. That's terrifying. So with how slow their mana is to develop, I think we do have to Helix this stupid Anadork. Because it feels like they're relying upon it. So they're a weird build of Ponza. Sure. And if they tap out for Karn, they're just dead. The worst play their deck could have access to right now would be Baloth. They'd go to 6, back to 10. Then Helix would put them back to 7. Could get through with 2 creature damage, put them to 5. Alright, they're going to 6 either way. Okay. A lot of basic forests. Haywire Might. Okay. Wow. Alright, we just could do it the easy way. Those are some interesting cards to have access to. Alright, so I did not see Karn Ponza on my checkoff list today. My bad. Alright. Gruul midrange. With Haywire Might in the main deck. Chalice is a possibility. Stone Rain effects are possibilities. So just bring in all of our anti... Do something weird like this. Now obviously, bring in Roiling back Vortex against Haywire Might's kind of middling, but this means I am completely insulated against Blood Moon if they want to be on that plan. Now obviously the LD plan is going to be annoying. We could bring in Sanctifiers. They are obviously a mostly red-based removal deck, but we'll try it like this for this game. See what happens. Pawns is a matchup I haven't played probably possibly since last year. Don't think we can keep this hand. So Bolt would absolutely wreck us. If they brought in any type of land destruction, but they appear to be more on, and I'm not completing sentences, so if this Ragavan were to live, this hand would be very good. The problem is, Bolt kills it, Ren kills it, and then we're stuck with this hand with a bunch of uncastable spells, and if they have some type of LD spell, we're in trouble. We have Bolt for a turn 1 Arbor Elf, but they're likely going to prioritize Utopia Sprawl. Smashes are good in a mid-game against a deck that seems to be very heavy on the Karn Liquid Metal Coating plan as their LD plan. But I still think this is a mulligan because of the 1-lander. On the draw, we could risk it, but I think I've talked myself into keeping this hand, but it's definitely questionable. Figure they're on turn 1 Utopia Sprawl. Turn 1 Hidden Stirrings. Okay, well, looks like they're really in on the artifact plan. They even have Urza Saga in their deck. Okay, so apparently they're not on the Blood Moon plan. Try this out, see what happens. If we get run in 6th, I'm going to be sad, but Okay, so we're not getting run and text. That's nice at least. Haywire Might, sure. So we'd ideally like to draw another land so we can smash that. Opponent gets to gain their life, which is obviously annoying, but it's whatever. We play Swiss Spear, pass turn. Opponent can potentially make Saga tokens now. Opponent found Karn, Urza Saga off of their well, that's terrifying. Alright, so we have a handful of smashes against who knows what. Opponent's just making a construct. Okay. Do you get maybe Shadow Spear, another Haywire Might? Shadow Spear, sure. Oh, we really need another land. Opponent has Karn in hand, 3 unknowns. Looks like they have either a Sprawl, Haywire Might, or Arbor Elf in hand. If they're fetching main phase like this, another Ancient Stirrings. Okay. Another Urza Saga. That is not really what we wanted to see here. Opponent with a whole bunch of cards. Land, please. Alright, passing turn. Felt like this game was very winnable if we actually drew a land, but we didn't, so. Opponent could be at 11, but... Alright, so we know they're not a Blood Moon deck now. They just can't afford to play in their deck. Deflecting Palm is certainly a card we can now consider. Boros Charm's back on the table. Roiling Vortexes are kind of subpar against Haywire Might, though we kind of already knew that, but Searing Blaze still serves a purpose. Riftbolt could come back in. Eidolon might be pretty middling against them as well. Try like this. Immediately into the 5-laner. I mean, we can keep this hand, but it is very, very middling against some of their plans. Think we put back either Lava Spike or Bolt. Probably Lava Spike here. Opponent's going to 6 at least. Hello, Romario. How are you doing? Pass turn. Well, Stress Dad, thanks for the raid. Hugely appreciated. Playing a weird, against a weird version of Ponza mid-range, but with like Karns and artifacts instead. I think I might have seen Spike on something similar to this list, but it's a very weird build. We're playing like Haywire Might, Liquid Metal Coating in the main deck. They're playing both 4-mana Karns, Urza Saga, etc. So that was your stream tonight, Strastad. What were you working on? Liquid Metal Torque. Okay, in some ways that is effectively the same as Liquid Metal Coating. And it has a Haywire Might. And so if we blow up the Haywire Might, they gain 2, so Blaze effectively becomes a 1 damage spell. Skewer, we put them to 8. Alternatively, we can try to ignore Haywire Might, but if they have a Karn coming down this turn, they're going to start eating our lands. So I think we need to try to use all of our mana this turn. Need to fetch another white source because of Karn specifically. Obviously this is not an ideal play, but when you're on the burn hand as opposed to a creature-based hand, gotta do what you gotta do. Ancient Stirrings, sure. Okay, fair enough. Good call. But effectively, they're trying to shut down. They also have Coating in their deck, too. I always forget that Torque can't target lands, because it honestly doesn't come up all that much. Another Haywire Might. EE for 1. Yeah. Which I suppose is a thing, but they have more. Okay, well, I'm going to be able to have this die next turn anyway, so I may as well attack in with a Swift Spear. This is just like a guaranteed block, right? Wait. Why? Why would you leave? Sure, that makes no sense. I understand wanting to leave artifacts in play for saga tokens, but did I leave Firecraft in the deck? Okay, so Firecraft's in the deck, so we have... They grab another fetch lane and crack it. We actually have more outs. But they don't need to crack it to activate. Alright. Put them to 4. If I were them, I would use their Haywire Might now, or their Engineered Explosives now, because if we top deck another Boros Charm, they just die in response. Obviously not likely, as we only have 2 Boros Charms left in our 50 card deck, but alright. Now, unfortunately, I do think we lose. Opponent gets to create a token, presumably go grab Shadow Spear, and then equip it, swing. With at least a 6/6/7/7. Yep. This is the situation we're leaving in palm. Seems like a good idea, but we drew a land anyway, so... So if we go to 11, is there any way we can get out of this with something? We don't have Palm in our deck, so even if we had Palm, they would go to 11. Next turn, swing with 2 Large Idiots, and no 1 card would get us there. So I think we're supposed to take the chump block, but we have no outs. Well, absorb 2 damage anyway. Alright, that's just not good enough here. Alright, back for match number 4. Guess I'd like to play first. Up against an opponent with some type of companion. Another Giganta deck. Obviously this hand is on the upper end of Burns' hands. They have Triple Goblin Guide, Helix plus that. The downside is we're going to be dealing ourselves a ton of damage with our lands, but let's mulliganing to 6. Alright, Swiftspear. Let me get some idea of what they're on. They're on a Ragavan deck. So I have no idea what's going on over there. Feel like this is some style of zoo deck. Yeah. Looks like we're up against a style of zoo. Tribal Flame Zoo. Okay. positives for Zoo is that obviously their individual card quality is much higher than ours. They get to play a Scion here, I would guess, Nakatl and Ragavan perhaps? Nope, just Nakatl. Okay, so it feels like they're holding open a Bolt perhaps. So the question becomes, do I kill their creature, put them to 5? Alternatively, I can play Swift Spear, suspend Riftbolt, or cast Skewer post-combat, hit them for 5, put them to 1? It's possible I'm actually just supposed to ignore this Nakatl. Do we play around them having Bolt? If they bolt a creature, chump a creature, or bolt a creature, kill a creature with Nakatl, they take 3, take another 3 with either Suspended Riftbolt or Skewer the Critics, and then they're dead to Helix. So I think we're just supposed to attack, ignore their creatures, or ignore their Nakatl, because it's just not relevant. Okay, can they kill us on the backswing? Nakatl puts us to 12. Tribal Flames puts us to 7. There is no 1 mana 5 damage spell. So I think we're good to attack like this. And the holiday clock going off softly in the background. Territorial Kavu. Alright, how does my opponent block? Block here, bolt something. And if they don't have bolt, then they're just effectively dead. They have Leyline Binding. Okay, same difference in terms of whatever is going on. Like I said, there's no way they can kill us on the back hit. Lightning Helix would buy them a turn, perhaps. But they would have to take damage to even be able to cast it. We know they have Kavu in hand, Tribal Flames in hand. I don't think Scion's in their hand. Are they just going to play like Expressive Iteration? No, Dashing Monkey. Okay, I don't think that gets you anywhere. Maybe they're trying to rip a Helix off the top of our deck. And they hit an Eidolon, which literally does nothing. I think we just go to attacks, force them to deal with creatures, and then just kill them with spells. Because they could easily have something here like Stubborn Denial to make the main attacks. Not that it matters with that land that we drew. But they're just dead on board, so no reason to show them more spells. Yeah. There are some weird cards they could have. It's unlikely they have something like Blossoming Column in the main deck, or at all, but that's also a card that could have blown us out there, so it's best to force them to count their mana first, especially since we have the pressure on board, then go over the top and kill them. Obviously, if we go to the main phase, we cast Skewer first, if we can, say they have, like, if they were at a higher life total, we would cast Skewer first, try to draw out something like Blossoming Column, or some type of 1 mana life gain, which generally most decks aren't running anyway. Most of your life gain is 2 mana or more, but isn't usually in the main deck. Helix is the card they're most likely to have for life gain in the main deck. Sideboarding is a little bit weird against them. Probably one pass. Sanctifier's mediocre. Like, they have Ragavan, they have Territorial Kavu, they have, but they also have Nakatl, they also have Sign of Draco. Now, obviously, it's immune to most of their removal, so it's an interesting card, but I don't think it's where you want to be necessarily. Exquisite Firecraft deals 4 damage to creatures, is expensive but relevant against a lot of their things. Deflecting Palm is a defensive card, can be okay in the matchup. Vortex you generally don't want in creature-based matchups. Smash, they have Scion, and they sometimes have Chalice in the sideboard. So it might be a card to consider if we see things. I think I'm going to shave on Eidolons on the draw, as we're more likely going to be on the defensive a little bit. Shave a couple Boros Charms, and maybe shave a Ragavan on the draw, since we're going to be more likely to control-ish deck in this game. Sand is fine. Obviously, it's heavily reliant on Swiftspear to deal damage, but decent chance it gets killed. 3 lands, 2 of which are canopy lands. So if this gets into an attrition game, we at least have our lands to kind of fall back on. Oh, it does nothing. Okay. Obviously, Swiftspear is our only real play here. They could have Bolt, they could have nothing into setting up for next turn with a Triome, which feels like what they're most likely going to do. We want to try to get as many of our 1-mana spells out of our hand as possible for something like Chalice that some of their decks run. Okay. Cuddle, sure. I think I'm supposed to suspend Ripple here, hold up Bolt for a Dash Monkey. Opponent's not going to be lacking on lands, so us pathing them is not going to be terribly relevant, although I do want to pass something more significant than a Nakatl. That kind of qualifies as something more significant. I think we just take the opportunity to bolt the face. Because I'm probably going to want to line up this Deflecting Palm against Territorial Kavu. So I think our turn's going to be Rift Bolt their face. Obviously they could have Stubborn Denial, which is a card that we can quasi-play around here. The way they're tanking it really is a tell that either they're trying to put the idea that they have it in my head, or they have, and they were debating whether it was worth playing around the damage. Now the question becomes, is do I try Path or do I try Palm? Obviously, Palm wins the game on the spot. It also taps them out even if they have Stubborn Denial here. So I think we're supposed to go for it, because there's a lot of cards in our deck that just end the game with a top deck here. But yeah, felt like they were sitting on a Stubborn Denial. We still have the Path as a backup, even though we're taking 8 here. Tribal Flames... No. Brawler. Okay. So we need to kill them this turn, if at all possible. That is not an ideal draw. Alright, that effectively ends it. So like if they could have had Tribal Flames there to put us to 1, which would shut off both of our Canopy lands. So on to match number 5. Back for match number 5. But for the next 2 weeks, next week we'll be streaming in the normal time, and then the following week my wife has convinced me to wear reindeer antlers on stream. So if you like stupid stuff like that, make sure you come back for the 18th. This hand seems perfectly reasonable. Obviously we're taking some damage from our Canopy lands again. We do have some helixes to offset. Every burn opening hand with a Goblin Guide or Swift Spear generally is better, hence why we're running Ragavan in the list as another 1-drop to make our hands reasonable, but yeah, this is definitely a keep. Goblin Guide, go. But our opponent did not reveal a companion, so we have no idea what they're on. Okay. Ledger Shredder, so most likely isn't Murktide. Couldn't go a league without playing Murktide, right? So we could get cute and potentially punish our opponent with a Boros Charm here, because this is most likely a Bolt or Unholy Heat, just getting a little bit of extra damage off of it, or get a little bit of a look at another land. But alas, that's not the best use of our mana. Best use of our mana is to double suspend Rift Bolts. Their Ledger Shredder will get a Connive trigger, but at this point we just kind of need to overwhelm their counter spells if at all possible, and try to kill them before they can mount a reasonable comeback. Okay, so they're going to go with Dragon Rage's Channeler into nothing, apparently. Or into Consider, perhaps? I think we just ignore the Channeler because we're really on a damage-based hand. And I'm not going to cast anything else, so if they're holding up Spell Pierce here, they're literally going to get nothing, and they just get to use Consider, which is fine. And then we're going to pass the turn. If they consider, we're just going to Boros Charm them or Lightning Helix them and then pass the turn. Opponent has to use their mana here. We let them connive first. They like the card. They draw the card. Now we Boros Charm them. Opponent's also been lucky that they've taken like minimal damage from their land base so far. Expressive Iteration. And Holy Heat into the graveyard. Okay. I think we're just going to fetch Basic Mountain. Go ahead and Boros charm them. Obviously, they could have Force of Negation as a weirdo in their deck, but I'm not going to play around that. I think it's much more likely that we're playing against other counter spells. So, notably, they need either a creature or an artifact to turn this Delirious. Very important to win game number 1 against Murktide, because then they get access to so they're going to cast a Murktide, which means we have to draw either a 1 damage spell or a 1 mana spell or another land this turn, or are we dead? Alright, that works. Alright, apparently they had nothing. That works. So, I like Firecrafts, I like Paths, I like Sanctifiers. Deflecting Palm is very middling in the matchup. On the draw, I'm not a huge fan of Eidolon. It's fine, but if they get a turn 1 Ragavan or a turn 1 DRC down, and we don't have specifically Bolt, it becomes a lot worse. It becomes a liability in a lot of situations on the draw. The other cards to consider cutting, Boros Charm, obviously 4 damage is nice, but it doesn't answer creatures. That's why I cut it a lot of the times. Could also shave some number of Ragavans on the draw. I think we'll shave 2 Ragavan, 2 Boros Charms. This hand seems perfectly reasonable. Turn 1, go. So I'm just going to play around them having turn 1 go and just suspend a Rift Bolt. Obviously, if they were hoping to use Unholy Heat or whatever, then we just kind of blanked their mana. Could have been a bluff. But they're likely to cast something here, so... And of course they have Ledger Shredder and Mishra's Bauble. No matter what I do here, they get a Connive trigger. They even brought in Mystical Dispute. That's somewhat terrifying. So I could play Swift Spear, could suspend Rift Bolt. I think we just play Swift Spear here. Argument for suspending Rift Bolt is we try to overwhelm their mana. No reason to chump attack in for 1 point of damage. Opponent with Consider, pitching a land into Unholy Heat, Connive. killing that. Do you swing for 4? Alright, so you either have another bolt or you just don't care about this Goblin Guide hitting you for 2. Probably looking for another trigger off the Goblin Guide before they kill it. Fortunately, they get nothing. Wow. You don't have another spell there. That's interesting. So you had Bolt and chose to take 2 damage. You must really have been worried about Eidolon here, maybe? But Eidolon really is not good for us. Like, obviously we're ahead on life total, but they're hitting us for 4 chunks. You have a Dash Monkey here? No, they have. We know they have DRC in hand, which is currently Delirious. Nope, they just have Murktide. Feels like they're holding up Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm. So we're taking 11. 1 card in hand is a DRC. So, definitely going to bolt their face while they don't have a land in play. So we take 11. So the plus side of popping the Sunbay Canyon, more draws at lethal burn spells. The downside is it becomes harder to play around Spell Pierce, which they have been at least strongly representing the entire game. Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm. So I think we're still supposed to crack it, but it is at least worth considering. Well, hello there. And that is why we put Exquisite Firecraft in the sideboard. Feel like the opponent's typing something. Could be wrong. Or this just could be the salty timeout. Opponent has conceded the game. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. Alright, quick wrap. Lost to Hammer Time. That feels like a rough matchup anymore. We had some alternative play lines we could have taken in game 2. They might have mattered. it's kind of hard to say. Them having Spell Pierce just kind of blew us out, regardless of what that matchup's just hard between Sanctifier and Vec. 1 mana, once again, white card that they played against us that always slips my mind. The 1 mana core that protection from red, sack it to prevent damage from red. I always see the art, but always forget the card. Anyways, that matchup, just rough. Scam we got lucky to beat. They had below average draws, game 2, game 3. Losing to the Carnies, I guess, for lack of a better term. The Gruul deck with Karns and like Liquid Metal Torque, Liquid Metal Coating, Haywire. Basically, we lost to the Urza Saga package with Shadow Spear with a mulligan decision game 2 that was relevant, and then beating Murktide and whatever we played in round 4, 5-color Tribal Zoo. This is kind of really a good estimate of where Burn's at in the meta. It's a deck that has to work a lot more for the wins than it used to. You have to play tight most of the time, and really your sideboard choices matter now. You only have 15 cards to play with. Gotta decide what you want to beat. Now Burn really lacks haymakers in a lot of matchups. You know, it really doesn't run Rest in Peace anymore. It really doesn't run Stony Silence like it used to when Affinity was a thing. So you're just kind of left with these general answer cards that sometimes they matter. Obviously Vortex is important against decks like Cascade and such. But the deck is what it is now. I do think continuing to explore Ragavan is important because I think the 1-drop starts are more important than ever for the deck. And Firecraft, it won us the game. What more you can say about the card? But I think I want to thank everybody for hanging out tonight. The huge raid from Strass Daddy. And I figure we need to send everybody on here. Let's see who is Apex currently streaming. Apex is currently streaming. I know they're a Magic channel, but I'm curious what they're actually streaming at the moment. Apex is streaming. Oh, Modern Bet. Okay, cool. We'll send you guys on to Apex Gaming. So, thank you everybody for hanging out. And if you want to come back, don't forget to hit that follow button. And hope to see you for next week's stream.